Story 1. I attended a wedding where the bride spoke not about her love for him or how wonderful he was, but about how much he had changed his personality for her and how that made everything perfect. Story 2. As a supporter of the couple, none of the speeches mention them as a couple. Friends adopt a tone of, "If you're happy, then I'm happy." The couple is not aligned on their wedding details and appears frustrated throughout the day. As a guest, the cost of hosting is often passed on to attendees. Additionally, if there is no lodging nearby, guests may feel unable to drink, leaving hosts annoyed that no one danced or stayed late. Outdoor venues with limited accommodations or insufficient meals can also detract from the experience. Yes, I understand it's your day, but hosting an event should consider the experiences of the guests, in my opinion. Story 3. I have attended many weddings, two of which I vividly recall. In both cases, the groom spent 98% of the reception and dancing with his friends rather than with the bride. Both ended in quick divorces. Story 4. I went to a wedding where the bride gave a heartfelt speech about how the groom is like a loyal dog. Always listens, is always around, and does what she asks. She meant it to be cute, but I found it somewhat inappropriate and demeaning. Yes, she did literally say, like a good loyal dog. I'm not interpreting that. Story 5. Small fish in inadequate glass containers as centerpieces. We all walk into the hall and find our tables, each with a belly up, completely dead, bloated guppy floating in its glass coffin. Many people lost their appetites. The marriage did not last a year. Story 6. The mother of the bride or groom trying to control everything as if it is her day is not a good sign at all. Story 7. The speeches revolve around times they were very intoxicated, including how drunk they were when they first met. Story 8. I attended a wedding where the bride and groom were in tears. The priest and altar servers were emotional, and the entire congregation was crying. Later at the reception, the cake was beautifully arranged in tears. Story 9. When the groom appears sickly pale, sweating profusely, and looking unwell instead of joyful. Story 10. I later discovered that a wedding I attended was also attended by the groom's mistress. That marriage was doomed. I have never seen a wedding where the groom smeared cake on the bride's face last. When the groom gently puts a little frosting on her nose or tries to feed her a large piece, it's fine. However, those where he smears cake all over her are doomed. Not a single one has lasted 10 years. Most do not make it to 5. When the bride smears cake, it is acceptable and those marriages tend to last. But not the other way around. Story 11. A 2014 study titled "A Diamond is Forever" found that higher wedding costs correlate with higher divorce rates. Couples who spent $20,000 or more on their wedding were 3.5 times more likely to get divorced than those who spent between $5,000 and $10,000. Larger weddings with more guests are correlated with lower divorce rates. Spending more than $2,000 on an engagement ring was linked to a higher likelihood of divorce compared to spending between $500 and $2,000. Story 12. The bride performing intimate acts with someone else in the restroom shortly after the ceremony would be considered a warning sign. Story 13. Family members were trying to make the day about anyone else but the wife. My friend's wife is a twin. At the wedding, the grandmother gave a speech about the two sisters that shared a womb. Everyone at the friends' table was looking at each other, cringing. Story 14. I once attended a wedding where the bride and groom were both ardent communists. There were many warning signs at that event. Story 15. Don't wear white unless, of course, you're Queen Elizabeth at Charles and Camilla's wedding. Camilla couldn't even wear white to her own wedding because Elizabeth had taken the color, so she had to wear gray. Story 16. When the groom starts his speech with, "This is for all you haters who didn't want to see us together," it is rumored he was referring to the bride's uncle and brother who do not like him. I am now hearing the girl wants to divorce him but cannot because they have a young son under 5 years old. Story 17. The bride is becoming increasingly upset over every detail that isn't exactly as she envisioned. Some individuals are more focused on the concept of marriage than on the person they are marrying. These are the individuals who have a perfect wedding in mind. Story 18. When the bride, her friends, and family were on one side of the building, the groom and his friends and family were on the opposite side. The couple was rarely together, and it felt like two different events. They lasted a year. Story 19. The bride and groom are arguing. If they can't get through the happiest day of their lives without an argument, that marriage will not last long. Story 20. How much money is being spent? There is an inverse relationship between the cost of the wedding and the duration of the marriage. Story 21. I am a wedding photographer. Although I am moving away from weddings, I have maintained contact with many of my couples. I have frequently encountered situations where one of the mothers or mothers-in-law tried to book me and insisted that I speak to them as if they were the client. I always consider the couple to be my clients regardless of who pays, as they are the ones who sign the contract. I suspect that their controlling behavior during the wedding often reflects a tendency to be controlling in other aspects of their lives, which can strain the marriage. Story 22. Many people were taking pills. A couple of my friends got married at the chapel at Graceland. They were among the first couples to do so. Everyone was consuming pills and heavily intoxicated. Needless to say, that marriage didn't last more than 5 years. Story 23. A destination wedding. Please take your valuable vacation time when and where we request and make it all about us. Story 24. A perfectly planned event involving parts of the family creates a palpable tension. My brother's last wedding nearly collapsed when his brother-in-law took too long to bring the bride back from the so-called fun kidnapping. The marriage did not last. Story 25. The groom fondles the bride while the officiant delivers the preamble, embracing his friends when they are declared married before kissing his new wife. Both of them then celebrate by drinking and enjoying the festivities all night. Story 26. Cousin wanted to get married and invited 30 to 40 people, but everyone objected. I am sure it was because of my cousin. Story 27. When the bride comes down the aisle singing, the balance of the ceremony and reception will be completely forgotten. Story 28. I attended a wedding where the bride's entire family and close friends gave speeches, and they only talked about how amazing she was. There was no mention of the groom in any of the speeches. They got divorced a year later. Story 29. If the couple has to start disinviting friends because so many people kept saying that this is a really bad idea and they cannot endorse it in any way. Story 30. Cake was smashed in each other's faces. I have never been to a wedding where this happened and the couple remained married. Story 31. If someone shoved a cake in my face, I would confront them to prevent them from continuing such behavior. Story 32. I love this question. What is something popular to do? Have a wedding. What do people desire? To have a unique wedding. What is the outcome? Someone posting about the uniqueness of your wedding as a red flag on an online forum. Story 33. Fighting and disrespectful behavior between the bride and the groom can manifest in their wedding speeches, where they may speak derogatorily about each other or appear constantly frustrated throughout the ceremony. Story 34. I once attended a house wedding, and people were scattering their shoes and slippers everywhere. Not a single person tried to be polite to the bride and groom or gave them space to move or breathe. Ever since then, I've resolved in my mind that the weddings around here are not sincere. I never cared. I only attend when I'm invited. For pictures and food. Story 35. I attended a wedding once where the bride ran away from the ceremony with her maid of honor. A colleague, who was also invited to the wedding, went to comfort her. She eventually returned and went through with the marriage but later divorced him. Story 36. When either the bride or groom drinks to the point of being unable to stand. During speeches, when the in-laws on either side make backhanded comments about their child's spouse. Story 37. They're still together, so I guess it wasn't a red flag for their marriage. However, I attended a wedding where all of the speeches were about how great, funny, smart, creative, nice, and sweet the bride was, while the groom received the highest compliment of good job finding such a catch on his wedding day. It just seemed off to me. Story 38. One of my best friends took ages for the wedding to start. We all had a bad feeling about it but soldiered on and waited. Turned out the groom was having a breakdown, and they talked him into it. I wish they hadn't, for my friend's sake. Later that day at the luncheon, the bride was nowhere to be found. I searched around and found her sitting with the groom in a side room while he ate because he wanted to be alone. Those of us close to the bride knew she had been saving money for years as a nest egg. We watched on social media as they spent extravagant amounts of her money on their 3-month honeymoon in Europe after he convinced her to quit her job. More happened as the years went on, including a sweet little baby who is nearly an adult now. But that wedding was a red flag. When she finally told me she was getting divorced, I couldn't help but blurt, "Oh, thank goodness." At which point she laughed. I got my friend back. Story 39. I understand not wanting traditional vows, but I attended a wedding where all of the vows were extremely childish, such as, "I promise not to leave the toilet seat up." They lasted about a year. Story 40. My cousin was boasting about the cost of the wedding, mentioning that his father-in-law covered all expenses. He and his wife divorced after about a year, partially because he invested everything in a struggling startup and declared bankruptcy, partially because he has an unpleasant personality and spends money recklessly, and partially because he becomes angry if others do not follow his wishes. Story 41. A newly married couple is having a loud argument in front of their children, still wearing their wedding clothes in the dead of night outside their apartment. The husband became upset when his wife's ex-boyfriend, who had shown up with someone else, arrived. The ex didn't know whose wedding it was. The groom was even more upset because the ex handed him a beer. Story 42. At a wedding I attended in December, the bride, groom, and eventually the entire wedding party participated in the Trump dance, where he awkwardly moves his hands as if performing an exaggerated action. This occurred when the dance floor opened, accompanied by the song YMCA. Story 43. I attended a wedding once and sat behind the groom's grandmother. Apparently, she is hard of hearing because everyone heard her whisper when the bride walked down the aisle, "I guess you can dress up trash." Story 44. At our friend's wedding, the bride got so drunk that she had to be taken to the hospital to have her stomach pumped. They are still together, though, so make of that what you will. Story 45. Cake smashing in the face is a recurring event at weddings. I have witnessed this a total of 5 times, and 4 of those marriages ended in divorce. The 5th one is quite unstable. Honestly, I do not understand how people find this remotely funny, especially after all the time and money spent to look their best. Story 46. I attended a wedding where the groom followed my partner and me, complaining about his wife's family. We were not surprised they got divorced soon after. Story 47. I attended a wedding where the bride appeared happy, glowing, and moving around the room while engaging with everyone excitedly. The groom seemed distant and almost unresponsive. 2 days later, he left to go to the store and did not return. They annulled the marriage and never spoke to each other again. He also did not return the gifts. Story 48. Marriage is the hardest thing you will ever have to do, but these two are strong enough to make it work. My friend, marriage is optional, and it is important for you to know that. Story 49. When the groom smashes the cake in the bride's face as a surprise, it can be cute if they wanted to do that together. However, it is horrifying if she did not want that and he did it anyway, showing a huge disregard for the makeup that someone paid a lot of money to have done professionally. Story 50. I attended a wedding that featured a buffet, but they ran out of food when approximately 50 people were still waiting to eat. They did not show any concern for feeding the remaining guests. Failing to provide adequate food for your guests is a significant red flag. Story 51. The father of the bride gave a speech about how he observed his daughter organizing the groom over time. Instead of sharing a story of their blossoming love, it became a narrative of how she began to influence him. It was quite uncomfortable to watch and lasted 3 years. Story 52. I attended a wedding where the groom expressed his love for the bride, and the bride also spoke about her love for him. A year later, she cheated, and they are now divorcing. Story 53. I don't want to read too much into things, but weddings can be good indicators for marriages. I've attended a few weddings where there was a lack of organization. I can count 3, arguably 4, from memory, and the longest marriage lasted 3 years. Money is not a determining factor here. I've been to inexpensive weddings where every necessary detail was thoughtfully planned. Having money is not the same as being organized. Money cannot replace being well prepared. If you are disorganized, more money typically leads to more chaos. If a wedding is more glamorous than elegant, that's a warning sign. If the wedding party or just the bride or groom is excessively intoxicated, that's also a warning sign. If the wedding party is stressed due to overscheduling, that's not a warning sign, but it is a red flag. I will always remember one bride who had a 5-hour photography session before her 2 p.m. wedding. She was up around 4 a.m. for makeup and getting ready. They left the reception around 11 p.m. I don't know how she didn't collapse from exhaustion. Story 54. I used to work at weddings as a bartender, and there was a speech I heard where the bride kept talking about how many times she wanted to leave the groom. That was a red flag. Story 55. I'm pretty sure I read that the more expensive a wedding is, the more likely the couple is to divorce. So, an extravagant wedding seems like a significant red flag. Story 56. A red flag at a wedding could be if there is obvious tension between the couple or their families, excessive drama, or if one person seems distant or uncomfortable. Another sign might be unreasonable demands from the couple or their families. Story 57. Shoving cake in each other's faces. Having a buffet with low-quality food like burgers, tacos, or fried chicken. The groom making jokes about how he is going to get lucky later. Story 58. My ex's little brother got married at a Chinese buffet. I don't think I need to explain how well their marriage went. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.